Okay, well, once again, Bob, I had a tag back there to let us know which one it was.
Did you? That's fine.
Yeah. I put a tag, this
all
one.
these years, I still can't get it right.
Well, at the last meeting, I just yelled back to somebody and said, hey, just the one with the tag on it.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you very much for showing up tonight. I especially want to thank the town council members for all being here on yet another night. They attend a lot of meetings throughout the month and appreciate them being there. This is part of a step process. What you're going to see tonight is just another step. It's going to show the benefits of a private-public partnership with the YMCA. It's going to show you models of other partnerships they've had throughout the country. I should add successful partnerships they've had throughout the country. The next part of this presentation will be what a Mount Airy Community Center may look like, and for that we'll ask for your input, and we'll continue to ask for the community's input. As we go through these slides and these presentations and these step process, I would just encourage everyone, especially town council members, if we see a problem, let's make sure we're part of the solution and not part of the problem. Of course, if certain members or if certain people in the community do not support a community center, just be very clear about that too. We really need to know, because a lot of people put a lot of years and effort. Those that support it, like myself, are going to be very clear about it. I support a community center. I think as far as funding mechanisms, we have ways to work it out. So as we go through the process, let's be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And with that, I will turn it over to Chris Covell of the YMCA.
Sure. Thank you guys for allowing us to be here again tonight. We were interested in what Mount Airy was wanting to do in terms of providing services for teens, and again, looking at the possibility of a community center. And to Pat's point, I've got about 30 years invested in a YMCA career. This is my 5th state. I've done like partnerships in all of those states: Indiana, Kentucky, Arizona, and most recently Texas. And so I'm going to show you one model in particular of what we did in Texas, and there's a second model. If we have a few minutes, I'll whip through that, and that's another great example of how you can pull different groups together in terms of partnership models that I was a part of in Arizona. Can everybody see that? You're going to be okay with that?
Can everybody hear?
Can everybody hear? Okay, I don't know if I need to get, if I'm being mic'd. I don't know, am I mic'd? Sounds like I am. Okay, all right. So this is an example of a YMCA partnership model where we had a park in Cedar Park in Texas that was underdeveloped, and the park was leased to the YMCA. There was no organized activities on site, so that was one of the things that was also identified as a need. And there was no source of revenue to underwrite the landscape and the maintenance of the park. All right? So the county, the city, there was a Catholic church involved, and the YMCA partnership all get together to talk about what capital improvements could look like. There was day camp residence was pending. We had a need for that. We were hoping to potentially do that in the future. And then we were looking at a joint operating agreement where we would share the cost of resident camp operations as well. On the Southwest Valley, if we get to this one involved new construction in a new service area. It involved a weak feasibility study, and it also had a young community that needed amenities, was lacking amenities. And we had a partnership that we developed between the city, the school district, again, and another church, and the YMCA. If we focus just on the Twin Lakes Park, this is a setting without the water, similar to, let's say, Watkins Park, where you've got some land that you already own that may have some great park amenities, but are underutilized to some degree, or maybe you've got some concerns about just the ongoing maintenance or supervision with the skate park, all those different things. So in this particular arrangement, we had a partnership between the county government, we had a partnership between the state Parks and Wildlife Department. There was the city of Cedar Park itself was involved, again, the Catholic Church of Austin. The school district had an interest in the park because they were interested in outdoor education. So we looked at providing a climbing tower and some other things for team building activities. And then, of course, the Y. This park was adjacent to an existing YMCA facility and sits on about 55 acres. So why are all these groups together, and why does it make sense to pull everybody together? Anytime that you can share resources, split expenses, and provide opportunities for more folks to use amenities within your community, it makes sense to try to capitalize on that any way that you can. So again, you had the county, which wanted us to provide supervision and maintenance of the programming of their parks in the most efficient way possible to the taxpayer. They saw an interest in that and saw value in that. We had the city of Cedar Park that had some bond or 4B board money, and they were going to utilize some sales tax revenues to improve the quality of life, and they thought through the park improvements would be one way to demonstrate how they would be reinvesting tax dollars. Then you had the why. We had a need. We wanted to secure an additional prime location adjacent to our existing facility that would allow us to expand our day camp operation. There's a lot of different programs and services that the Y provides. We're a membership-driven organization, which means that the majority of our funding does not come from city, does not come from state, does not come from federal. It comes from fees that we charge to participate in our programs. So fees that you would pay to be in aquatics, fees that you would pay for childcare, summer day camp, or to be a member. We're a fee-based, membership-driven organization. And so camp is, in daycare, one of the two programs that have some of the greatest return on investment and net us the greatest amount of dollars in order to reinvest back into our other programs and services. So it makes sense to try to expand in that area. Then you had the church. They were looking to provide overnight for youth retreats in their surrounding parishes. They were traveling an average of anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours to do their retreats, and they were wanting to find something more locally, centrally located to the Cedar Park, Round Rock area. And they thought, well, if they had found a partner that had land or had opportunity to land, had the infrastructure being roads, water, sewer, those types of things, if they could bring some capital dollars to the table to invest, let's say, in some cabins or infrastructure such as pavilions that they could enclose for large group meeting space, it made sense that they could use that type of space on the weekends for their retreats. Not every weekend, but on several weekends throughout the year, and then the rest of the time it would be made available, or the Y would manage the property and rent the property and generate revenue to offset the operating expenses. And then you had the state of Texas, obviously wanted to expand opportunities for Texas residents to utilize their parks. And in order to do that and to promote that, they wanted to make sure they had healthy parks, well-established parks, and parks that were kept up and maintained in an appropriate fashion. So you kind of had the perfect storm, right? You got all these different groups that all want a little piece of the pie and all bring some value to the table. So the basic concept is the Y would operate the park for the county, and the Y would underwrite all the park maintenance costs. For that exchange, the Y got first right of refusal for the space and the hours of the day. It was still a public park. We could operate a Y day camp or run a program, a sports program, or a soccer or t-ball program, and because it was still a county park or a city park, as a county resident or a city resident, you could still come into the park during Y operating of a specific program and put your fishing pole in the pond if you wanted, or drop your canoe, or have a picnic, or feed the ducks. That didn't affect what we were doing. The YMCA duties, we were going to set the park fees. We were going to be responsible for opening and closing the park and have restricted areas. We would establish the park schedule, and we would provide the maintenance for the park. We actually had a little residence, and one of our day camp directors, we didn't have an overnight camping yet. That was something that's actually happening now. They're in the process of building resident camping there for overnight camping. But we had a small residence where the guy that operated the day camp during the summer, part of his exchange for his compensation was he got to live there very inexpensively. So he woke up every morning, and this is the first thing he saw when he woke up. Pretty cool deal. The county duties would enter into a long-term operating agreement. You can't see the number, but it says 100 years over to the side. There's a 1 and a 0 there. So there's a long-term operating agreement for the Y to lease the property, so to speak. Any construction or renovation projects were agreed upon between the Y and the county. So we couldn't just kind of willy-nilly go and drop some building or do something that wasn't in compliance with city ordinance or zoning or permitting. We had to follow all the rules that everybody else had to follow. But we had a responsibility, and we had a vision and could strategically kind of think about what was in the best interest of the park and how to assist and or plan for the infrastructure or the growth of the infrastructure of the park. And then if there was something that was cost prohibitive for the Y to do, or we would go back to the county, or if the county said, hey, we think we want this to happen, and the Y wasn't in a position and they had found the funds through bonds or some other means, then we would figure out what that looked like and how to go about accomplishing that. Fencing, safety systems were necessary for the property, we would do that. And then we had a great working relationship with the sheriff. I mean, just like your county sheriff or your local police department has certain responsibilities for your general community spaces, this would be no different. They would patrol that area as they would any other part of the community. So the state leases the park to the county, and then the county basically turns around and leases the park to the Y with an operating agreement or some kind of MOU, a memorandum of understanding. And this is great, but the maintenance in the land upkeep is $100,000 a year, so we need to make some money. So we've just now taken on somebody else's debt as the Y. We get access to this property, we get to program it. Now I got to figure out what programs I can implement in this park to generate the revenue to take on the debt. So similar to, as you'll see in the presentation that we're going to do specific to Mount Airy, if we I'll use Watkins Park as an example, you have costs associated with maintaining Watkins Park, right? You have costs associated with the skate park. How cool would it be if you found a partner in an organization maybe like the Y? Again, it doesn't have to be the Y, but how cool would it be if you could identify a partner that could take on some of that day-to-day operation and maybe even in return reduce the operating cost that it currently costs the city to maintain that space. Does that make sense? Okay. That's kind of where we're going with this, people. Glad you're all awake. I know it's late. It's been a long day. So the YMCA, the state, the city of Cedar Park, and the Catholic Church partner, and they basically plan the master plan and what the park improvements are going to be. So we all sit down at the table, and everybody gets to say what they like, what they don't like, what's important, what's not important, and we basically come up with a list of priorities. And because there's costs associated with that, it's feasible to understand that it may have to be a phased-in approach. I may not get, I being the Y, the Y may not get everything that's on their wish list immediately. And so you have to kind of phase it in. And therefore the county we may not be as a Y be able to accommodate everything that the county or the city wants. Because again, it has to be mutually beneficial. The definition of a partnership, in my opinion, is that it's mutually beneficial to both parties. It has to be a win-win situation. We're not coming to the table, the Y isn't coming to the table with any community that we have conversations with looking for a handout and not wanting to be good stewards and take responsibility for whatever it is that we want to do. And at the same time, we aren't in a position to underwrite communities' debt or communities' debt service without having a good business plan in place. So then you look at day use for general public use. So again, it's open to the public. They can come in. There was no fee for it. We just, set some hours. I mean, at 10 o'clock, we close the gates, those kinds of things. But basically, you could come in and use the park. We wanted to use the park. Phase one was to set the hours for the park use and then for the Y to be able to use it during the summer for day camp and special events. That's where we were going to make the revenue, at least we thought. That's where we're going to make the revenue to underwrite the cost of taking on $100,000 worth of park maintenance costs. The second phase would be in a perfect world if we were to grow everything and the church was able to get their act together and bring whatever piece of the puzzle that they were going to bring to the table, we'd eventually be able to grow it into a resident camp and a retreat center. Okay, but that takes some bigger capital dollars and takes a little more time and a little more planning and probably have to add a little more infrastructure. So let's take a closer look at the 100K. This is just an example. That's now the Y's responsibility, let's say, as an example. How are we gonna take care of that? Well, we need to build, the Y has a facility adjacent to the park. That's the facility. That's the piece of the puzzle that generates the revenue that helps offset what we're gonna do outside of the facility. So inside that building, you have aquatics, you have a teen center, you have membership, you have youth sports programs, you have senior programs, you have all that kinds of stuff, right? That pays the bills at the end of the day. Then you have the county and the Y decide to co-fund parking lot and park restrooms. So we've decided that, you know, there's gonna be, potentially, we're estimating gonna be a higher use. There's gonna be more people coming to this park because we're gonna make it prettier, we're gonna expand the services and put some additional amenities there. So we need to plan for that. So back to the master planning piece, we need to accommodate, we look at upgrading the restrooms, and we need to look at additional parking. Hence the lovely picture of the restroom, right? Can't leave that out. All right, so we built nice structures, permanent structures. Then we looked at, again, we looked for grant monies. What grant monies are there available? Are there grant monies, CDBG monies? Are there Parks and Wildlife monies? Are there federal monies that, you know, you could use for capital type projects that make sense and that add value and increase the assets of the community? And there were some dollars available, and so we were able to secure some of that funding, and then we were able to bring some dollars to the table as well. That was an outdoor pavilion that we kind of created. So there's an amphitheater that was available to the community, and the Y used every morning. We had opening ceremony for the kids that came to camp, and we met there, and we set up a little mini band and just did some really cool stuff. And then the schools, we have a partnership with the schools for outdoor education, and so a lot of times that was a great outdoor education classroom setting. We'd hold small concerts in the park. We did all kinds of things there.
Chris, if I could just interject.
Sure.
We're looking specifically at a park, but for people in the Mount Airy, which you should probably keep in mind, this setting would also work on Center Street, where you certainly could use some revitalization. It could work where areas of town that need to be built up. So it's not just a park setting, but we just happen to be focusing on the park.
Yeah, this is just one example.
It's just one
There's
example.
one model.
This could go anywhere. So
Yeah,
as you look down
and
Center
I can
Street.
show you, I'm kind of taking my time with this one, just a few minutes, to give you a little history so you can kind of grasp the concept. The second one I can show you is actually, it's a three-way or four-way partnership that we did, again, with the church, with the school district, and with the city, where we built a pool facility. And I can whip you through that one.
And so just keep in mind sort of the entrance to Watkins Park, where we haven't hooked through Center Street yet. That whole area, there's some property adjoining there that's potential. There's property right on Center Street that would help revitalize downtown. That's potential. Certainly Watkins is potential, but these are keying into all potential sites. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, and this is an example. This is a climbing structure. It's a really cool climbing tower that actually the school district ponied up about $50,000 for us to initially build it. The Y owned it. The Y was responsible for the liability. The YMCA was responsible for the staff and trained the staff that managed the climbing tower. We did corporate groups, we did team building, and we did outdoor education for the school. The school actually incorporated some of their physical education curriculum and would bust the kids out, and they worked with the Y and scheduled it in advance and did outdoor education and some other things, and some of their physical education. And then they did team building for some of their sports teams. It was a one-time deal. They just paid an upfront kind of initial gift for this to be constructed. And then the Y was responsible for maintaining it, for the safety of it, and the inspections. And they added multiple features since that original structure was built. That's kind of an old slide. That's another pavilion that was built. Oops, did I skip one? And then the 4B Corporation, again, with the Y, we helped fund trailhead improvements that promote day use and summer day camp operation. So again, if we think about the park model, and for instance, if we use Watkins as an example, you got your rails to trails. And so if you want to connect to that, if you want to expand on that, if you want to improve on that, there's opportunity for that as well. Those types of programs and those types of services mesh fairly well with the Y in terms of what we do every day. So again, how do I get my $100,000 back? What happened? So here's an example. This was the trend, the national trend for summer camp growth. So from 2003 to 2008, over a 5-year period, nationally, this is what the YMCA was showing the growth was. Here's what happened when we took over the park and we made park improvements. And this is not typical, people, but we were pretty darn excited about it. This is why. So this is where we were. 2004, we started making improvements. Wow, isn't that crazy? 700% growth. We basically, when we started this in 2004, we were averaging about 75 kids a day, and we operated camp for 11 weeks. And we didn't do any special events because we didn't have any pavilions to rent. We didn't have any boat rentals. We didn't have any boats. We didn't have climbing tower. We didn't do any of that. 4 years later, we were averaging 650 kids a day were running through camp, and we generated about $1.4 million worth of revenue. And we did about 50 special events each year, which netted about $200,000 a year in revenue. Okay? So that's one example. You want to see this one real quick? You haven't seen this, Pat. You want to see this real quick? You want to move on to the Mount Airy one?
You want to do one more example?
Yeah, let's give you this another example real quick. So this was in Arizona. So this one, real quickly, the general concept was that they were looking at B-bond, like a bond process. And so the YMCA wanted to start fundraising to build a Y in the Southwest Valley. And they did a feasibility study that said that we had the ability to raise some money and that there'd be support for a facility. And a market study confirmed that. The city did a community needs survey and confirmed the demand for indoor-outdoor recreation. And the city budget cannot accommodate the O&M, the ongoing operating of such a facility on their own, but was interested in a shared O&M and capital construction costs. The school district needed a competitive pool for this swim program. But they had the bonding capacity, but they didn't really want to be responsible for the ongoing operating, but they thought they could bring capital to the table. And then you had good old Catholic Church again. They wanted a teen center for their programs, and they were actually located adjacent to this property, and they were thinking about building a teen center adjacent to the church. So we got them to partner with the Y to bring their capital dollars so that we could expand the teen center that we wanted to build in the Y that they would then have access to. This was just a letter of intent, which is very typical. At some point you get to a partnership, you've identified your partners, and you kind of lay out, what the intent is. Nobody's committed to anything. This isn't binding. It's just, hey, we've agreed that we're going to move forward and that we want to continue to investigate this on some level. And so here's, I'll give you my blessing to spend some time and energy on it. So then we start to put together what the agreement looks like. What's going to surround the pool? Who's going to own the pool? Who's going to establish the schedule? What's the Y going to do? What's the Y's responsibility? How are you going to share the subsidy? What happens with the land? Who's responsible for capital upkeep? All of those different kinds of things. Those are all really good points of conversation that get brought up and that get discussed when you're identifying partners. And there's no bad questions when you're identifying partners and partners are brought to the table. You want to think of all the different scenarios and all the things that could happen. Then we talked about health and wellness. We knew local cities provided significant capital contributions for facilities, and the Y had the ability to raise some money for the remaining portion of the facility. And then we were going to have a teen center that the Catholic Church was going to help underwrite, that not only would the church have access to and be able to utilize, but then the Y would be able to use it during the non-peak hours that the church didn't want it reserved. So it was a win-win situation. This was basically just a facility schematic. We sat down with the groups and we worked with different architects, and we looked at the pool partnership with the local high school. Then you had the partnership with the church, and then you had the health and wellness partnership with the local city. So we did design meetings. Everybody got to, give their input on what it should look like. We put together operating budgets. So you figured out what was the term of the agreement. You looked at projected operating cost. You looked at what the community would pay for daily usage fees. We looked at rental fees, classroom program fees, All that gets deducted out. You figured out what your net projected operating loss was. You looked at then the membership, percent of membership dues that would go to cover it, and determine city subsidy if any was needed. And then hopefully in the perfect world, you have a balanced operational budget. So the net projected operating loss, that's usually the key negotiating point. You have to figure out what that's going to look like, and you got to figure out if there is going to be one, who's going to be responsible for taking on that. In a perfect world, you get to a point where you have a balanced operational budget. That again, it makes good financial sense for all the groups to get coming together. We had a bond committee. YMCA had to review the questions for approval. It actually went on a ballot. The bond committee had a chart of work. We worked through all this through the different cities. And in this particular one in the Southwest Valley, there was actually 3 little cities. It was like Goodyear, Avondale, and Southwest. So there were 3 cities that the Y was actually kind of negotiating with, just based on where the property was and the proximity to that area. Then they had a bond election, and this was, just the statistical stuff of what they were anticipating and what they thought the response was going to be. And then we had success. The voters approved the pool for the YMCA, and so we were able to kind of, put the shovel in the ground, so to speak, and really start to put some legs on the project. We came up with then a management agreement. You had to develop the key specifics regarding the scheduling, the operating budget, and the community fees, and what, if any, was there going to be any kind of city subsidy, and what would that look like? We had to come up with with the school, we had to come up with a competitive schedule that allowed to meet the needs for the school, because they were ponying up some dollars for the capital, so it only made sense that they got some prime time in the pool. And then we had to figure out what was fair and what that left the Y with to program, and if we could generate revenue, and if we had enough pool time that would make the members that bought memberships to the Y happy. So you have to balance all that, which is not an easy thing to do, but it's doable. So that was the schedule for when the pool was in session and they had competitive season. This is what the schedule looked like when the school didn't need it. It wasn't the priority months. Then you had some kind of a land lease. You had to look at what that would potentially look like. Where's the property line versus where's the land that the church owns or what the school district owns. So we leased additional land from the city for 50 years. The YMCA leases the entire pool land to the school district to satisfy the bonding requirements. And each state is different. Sometimes you can do that. And I think in the state of Maryland, any properties that school districts go to build on, they actually have to own the land. Other states, it's not that way. You can do ground leases and things like that. So we provided, we reported out to the different groups the usage. We reported out operating costs. We reported, budget information. They wanted to see that. And we came up with a satisfactory agreement, and then they sold the bonds to get the project built. This was the construction. We had a little baby pool. It's always fun to do a little ground baby. So they had a baby pool with dirt in it, and they were going to do the little fake shovel thing. And then you can see down below, it's hard to see, but they were kind of moving the ground. That's the Y is getting built there. That's the actual Y construction. And that's the end result of the pool. And so, that's the end of that presentation. But those are 2 examples. And again, I've done partnerships with hospitals. I've done partnerships with just cities. I've done partnerships. One partnership, we had actually 3 hospitals that were involved. One that took responsibility for covering the cost for the warm water therapy pool. One that wanted designated office space for their doctors. They wanted to house cardiac and pulmonary rehab. And so they wanted to have an outside office access, and then they wanted doors that opened up into the general fitness area so that their patients could come in and use the treadmill or the ellipticals. And then I've done a partnership, a third partner, hospital partner that came to the table at this one project. They underwrote the like a community room twice the size, about the size, maybe a little bit bigger than this room, that had like a gourmet kitchen at one end, so they could do nutritional, diabetes classes, weight loss, all those kinds of things. And again, when they weren't doing that for their programming purposes, then it was made available to the Y to program that space. So you can be as creative as you want, or you can be as limited as you want in terms of your vision and strategically who you want to bring to the table to potentially partner with. And so the next piece, I'm going to close this out. And
Chris, if I could just summarize
Absolutely.
very quickly, I think what we just saw was an example of partnerships with the Y without getting into the weeds of the specifics of these programs. These can be tailored to partnership. My concern and your concern is the town of Mount Airy. And these partnerships could be so we get use of an arts facility, we get use of a teen center, that we actually have a say in the program without the burden of ongoing management, which is really one of the largest components of these facilities. First you got to build it, then you got to outfit it, then you got the long-term management, which I don't think the town wants to be involved in. The Y has a long, how many year track record, 100?
155, 160
155 year
years.
track record of these partnerships that work. And so I think that's something that should be interesting to us here tonight. And I understand you're also working with other towns and
Yeah,
I think
Brunswick.
Brunswick
Brunswick's in
is
the
Brunswick
room.
here?
Yeah.
Brunswick, I'm
Bob?
sorry, the meeting ends at 8 o'clock. And so, certainly Mount Airy is appreciative that they have an interest in us, and hopefully we can come up with something. I'll let you go. Now, this is your...
I had one question about one of the slides. It's, your slide said, you showed a picture of the one with the lake, the park that had the
Yes.
lake. Was it Twin Lakes Park?
Twin
was
Lakes,
it?
yes, sir.
Okay, got that, okay. And you showed a picture of the facility that was built there.
Correct.
Who funded the construction of that facility?
The Y did.
Okay, that's what it said, and I was like,
Yep.
okay, that's,
The Y funded the construction of that facility and is still currently paying debt on it.
okay.
Has built a performer to pay debt on that. But by doing the park improvement and being able to expand the summer day camp operation and grow from, a $200,000 budget to 1.4, it has given the Y the ability to pay off the
To pay
debt
for that, right.
sooner than
Sure,
later.
okay.
That's
So
the
it's
project,
accelerated
public
that
partnership.
opportunity. And since then, they've just got done with another expansion. They just added onto that facility a teen center and an indoor pool. They have an outdoor pool, which that picture didn't show, but they just built an indoor pool and they just built a teen center, and that was another capital campaign.
Now, you do have examples of partnerships with the Y where towns or hospitals have come up with the seed money, but with a payback program for
Correct.
that seed money.
Yeah, Hutto, Texas is a good example where, and actually they broken ground. That was a project I was working on right before I left. And they did $5 million bond, the city did, and basically went through an RFP process and in terms of construction and contractors, but with the intent of building a facility that would be managed by the Y, operated by the Y, and eventually owned by the Y. And they actually will finish construction in December and hope to open the doors by the 1st of January, if not sooner.
So there's
And it's
dozens
about
of
a 35,000
partnership models we
Yep,
could
that's about a
come up
35
with and present.
Yep, that's about a 35,000 square foot facility. We're in the process right now, not to, belabor the point, but we're looking at the south part of the county. Most of you know or aware, we've got about 22 acres in Urbana. So we're going through.
Was that donated?
It was donated. It sits right between the middle school and the high school. So there's an 8-phase process, and we're in phase 3, phase 4 right now. And we're doing our due diligence to kind of, decide if this is a real viable opportunity or not. Because again, we're not going to do anything that doesn't make good business sense and or put the Y in financial risk. So to your point, Pat, when you look at these partnerships, the Y usually brings some things to the table, not just the management or the leadership experience, but then sometimes it's capital, it's the ability to raise dollars, sometimes it's the ongoing commitment to take on the debt or the operating liability that goes along with that. It could be a combination of that. But there are, there's conversations we're having with Middletown. We have an interest in some energy and some enthusiasm to establish a presence again in Brunswick. And again, you guys were looking and had identified several needs, some of which we do as our core areas of business, and so it kind of made sense to start having a conversation to see if there was something that the Y could do to help close the gap or fill that void and help you provide some services that up to this point you really hadn't figured out how you wanted to do that. And I'm not saying that we figured that out yet, but we're getting closer.
Is that where the next presentation is going to
Yeah.
kind of frame what a Mount Airy? And just
Yeah.
to give the community an idea, several of the council members, we've gone on field trips to look at other community centers and what they look like and what may work for Mount Airy. I think the size and general consensus was something on a smaller scale, the 20,000 square foot range, but it still has to work for the Y. So
Yeah, and again, I'm sorry.
this is a workshop, so go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, so is it already, I mean, you guys are out looking at other Ys and stuff, is it safe to say that whatever we do, wherever the community center, that the Y is going to be partnered with Mount Airy to do it?
At this point, the Y is the only one that's come to the table, so the plan that I know me and a few other people involved in a grassroots effort will submit will be with the Y, simply because nobody else has come to the table. If you have somebody, please bring it to the table. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say to anybody that asks us the question, why the Y? Who else?
Just to
Well, I'm gonna ask
clarify
them
though,
that.
the two facilities were not Y facilities. So the two facilities that we went on for benchmarking trips
Were
were
county.
actually
They're
county
actually county.
facilities. One was in Baltimore and the other one was in Howard County. And actually, some of us haven't seen the Baltimore one, and we're going to see that. We're taking a road trip this Thursday. So I could have taken you to a Y. I could take you to any Y you want to go to, but we decided that we would actually look at facilities that were built by municipalities, to look at the size and the scope, and then also to dig a little deeper to try to determine how do they fund it, how do they fund it ongoing, what's the ongoing funding source look like, and then at some point, I mean, this council and you as community members, again, I'm not selling the Y necessarily. If there's a place for the Y to have in this process, and if there's value in partnering with the Y, and again, there has to be value for both of us, then, you know, we would highly entertain what that conversation continues to look like. But I'll make a clarifying statement. We've dug so far, and you're going to see how far we dug in terms of the research. We haven't dug deep enough to the point where I've got my board on board and committed to anything. We haven't dug deep enough to where I could say to you, whether it's a 20,000 square foot facility, a 15,000 square foot facility, or a 35,000 square foot facility, that I have put together a budget pro forma that makes it work and balances it. That takes time and energy, and that takes a little more homework. And until I know that we're the best option, or the option, or the preferred organization that you want to really have some hard conversations with, at some point, you know, I'm going to stop doing the research and I'm going to back off a little bit, because again, that takes time and energy, and I need to know that there's some
If there's the interest, yeah.
in sight. But there are some really good resource tools that we have access to that, and I've shared that with Bill and Monica and a few other folks, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and it's not something that there's some really cool tools that we can pop some information into that will spit out a pro forma pretty quickly. But there's still a couple moving parts. You know, location's a moving part. Size of the end of the day, the actual end of the size of the facility is a moving part. Even if you figured out the total square footage, what specific square footage goes to each of those areas is a moving part. So there's still a lot of things to flush out, but you got that's a great first question. Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah, can I ask first, do the council members have any questions up to this point, or you want to hold on? These are the decision makers at the table, so we'll make sure they get their questions answered.
The decision maker now.
Okay. Well, that's true. It's a good philosophy.
All right, you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to kind of just bring you up to speed in terms of kind of what we've done. And some of this may be a little bit of what we've talked about before. So we looked at your master plan, basically, and you had two key things that I was able to pull out of your master plan, which is you as a community, you want to focus on initiatives that protect, maintain, and enhance the quality of life that you currently enjoy in Mount Airy. and you want to create an environment that promotes small town charm, is highly desirable location to raise family, and you want a close-knit and caring community. That came right out of your town master plan. That's kind of a summary that I got, right? Your community needs summary. If we think about you've done 2 studies in the last 10 years, you did one just recently. There was about 6 or 7 kind of key statements that came out of that, which is not uncommon when you do a community needs assessment. In fact, 4 out of these 6 are almost identical to the community needs assessment that I just completed in the south part of the county with Urbana. You want structured programs for teens, hands down. That was strong. You want a greater sense of community. You basically want some kind of place to go, to hang out and to be and to congregate as individuals and as a family. You want that Cheers kind of mentality, so to speak. You want to engage and strengthen the entire family. So you want some kind of place to go where you could go in as a mom and go at one end of the building and do an activity, and little Johnny could go at the other end. That's important. But you also want a place to go that you as a mom can go into the facility with little Johnny and actually participate in the same activity, and not necessarily arrive together and then go your separate ways, but arrive together and actually do something together. So that's kind of cool. You want programs that support adults and teens, and you want things that develop healthy habits and physical activity. That was high. And then you want stuff too that, engaging seniors. That's a growing population all across the country. And you want to expand and enhance and strengthen the current arts and humanities initiatives. That's what I got out of your community needs assessment, okay? So the next stage of this is addressing the community needs. Specifically, there were 4 things that came out. That was like your top 4. You said you wanted a community center. You wanted connecting pathways, the rails to trails. You wanted additional or enhanced athletic fields, indoor sports complexes. And you wanted something that was going to focus on the green or be pro-environmental in terms of initiatives. Those were the top kind of 4 things that came out of that. Program specifically, you talked about things, again, involving the family. You wanted social interaction. You wanted outdoor adventure activities. You wanted educational types of things. You wanted non-competitive, non-traditional kinds of adult and youth programs. And again, you wanted something that was going to encompass and support healthy living and healthy choices. Does that make sense? Okay. So, the opportunity, the return on investment, what does this look like? If you think about the development of a new facility, it needs to be relevant and competitive, right? So at the end of the day, we want it to be self-sustaining. Whoever manages it, whoever owns it, it needs to be self-sustaining. That's a perfect world. The expansion of programs and services will enhance, and you'll come up with a balance, like a balanced business model, and we could do that through membership and program revenue. You have to create something that allows us to generate revenue. I think the return on investment is you're going to improve and increase the town of Mount Airy's assets. If you build something from a capital perspective, I'm assuming that it's going to get added to your list of assets, and that would only, add value to who you are as a community. It's going to increase the ability to meet the community needs, right? And then it's going to enhance, we hope, the town of Mount Airy's image. It's going to, again, instill pride and excellence in everything you do, and you're going to be able to demonstrate how you've improved the overall quality life experience, right? Isn't that what you want at the end of the day? Adding quality of life to the city of Mount Airy? So again, that's kind of the opportunity for return on investment. That's our accomplishments to date. There's a little hand clap in there, people. Trying to make sure everybody's awake. So accomplishments to date. We've completed a community needs assessment, right? And we started prospecting and identifying community partners. So again, to your point, have we finalized that it's going to be a Y? Not necessarily. There's again a couple hoops that we need to both jump through. But there may be multiple partners. There may be hospital, maybe a group to bring to the table. I think the school district, we need to have some school district representation, and there could be some really good conversations with them in terms of what that could look like, smell like, and feel like. All right? And then the third thing that we've done is the task force members have participated in 2 benchmark trips to review and evaluate facilities. Here's where I was going to be quiet for a few minutes, and Bill or anybody else, if they wanted to stand up and kind of just tell you, Bill do it, tell you a little bit about the 2 trips and why it was important to do those visits.
Okay. When we looked into community centers, we saw there were a lot of places around the state that had community centers or rec centers or some portion of, some combination of those things. We didn't have any experience in it. Some of us had visited those kind of facilities or those sorts of things, but we didn't really understand how they were designed, how they worked, all of that. So let's go see some, right? When we started researching, well, who can give us some suggestions and recommendations, what we found was there are several different types and styles out there, but 2 really good examples that are close by are over in Howard County and over in Baltimore County. Very, very different approach. As folks told me, they build Taj Mahals in Howard County. They have a lot of tax dollars to work with, but what you'll see is probably a much larger facility than you may need, but you will see the components of it, and you see how it works together, you see how it's built and the style of it and so forth. You get a sense of that. And so we went to North Laurel, and we went to Glenwood. Glenwood's about 5 or 6 years old. North Laurel was built a couple years later from a lot of the things that they learned in Glenwood. Okay? Glenwood is 54,000 square feet. North Laurel is 66,000 square feet. It's larger because it's got some additional residents. It's got a state highway patrol office, and it's got a whole health wing, and they contribute to the operating costs. Okay? Now it's Howard County, a lot of tax dollars, and those facilities were paid for and are operated with county funds. Entirely different model. That's not going to fly here. But what we saw was very large, complex facilities. They are green built. They're LEED certified. So we saw the difference that can make down the road in terms of operating costs and reduces it. Beautifully designed buildings, very spacious, very, very nice. We also learned, especially in the North Laurel facility, 70% of their revenue is gained from rentals. They designed it understanding what were some of the kinds of facilities their community didn't have and was asking for. And we know that that occurs here too. We don't have reception areas, we don't have other kinds of things, okay? They built that in, and as a result, it is taking off in terms of the income that's being generated.
We're from Mount Airy CAD, and our biggest concern while we came here, we need places to go to meet as a group. We have community socials once a month,
You're not the only groups we hear that.
and we're nonprofit. I mean, we don't have enough money to rent a space. I mean, we use walk-ins when it's warmer out, but we have nowhere to go really that's cost-effective for our type of group. So that's like a big,
Be interesting to see what your rental structure is.
yeah, that's what you said, rentals, her and I looked at it.
What group are you in?
Yeah, what group?
What group?
It's Mount Airy Parents at Home.
Well, actually, what I was, in part of my vision, and I don't know what's going to be in a final proposal to council, would be some space, because certainly Mary Beth and I operated the teen center. We had 0 funding.
Yep.
So we don't have money either, so I'm hoping with this partnership that we'll get some community use at no cost, or whatever we can work out.
How many do
worldwide.
you usually have? Is this, how many people attending? Is it, I mean, you have kids and
For
every,
example, we're hosting a Halloween party for our members, and we have 100 people showing up.
But you don't have any funding to rent any place?
We have very little dollars. We only ask $35 a family to join. And most of the halls and churches and things here in Mount Airy, a rental would be $250 for 2 hours.
Library's not large.
Library's free, but it's not.
it's not big enough. That's why I was asking how big you were. That's not gonna
Plus
fit.
it's book solid.
Can I give you an example, not to get too down in the weeds, but to that point, I mean, like,
No,
for
but
instance,
Chris was right. This is the stuff.
yeah,
I-
this is
I
good.
know we don't want to get too down in the weeds, but from a council perspective, this is more important to me than what folks in the community.
No, and I understand. What I'm saying though is the reason I was going to respond is because, as an example for the Y, for instance, in our existing facility in Frederick, you know, we have community spaces and we we partner with nonprofits, so we don't charge nonprofits. If you're a nonprofit and you need space, you can coordinate with the Y, and if the space is available and we're able to accommodate you, we don't charge you for that space. So for instance, the Sea Scouts meet there on a regular basis. Hartley House hosts their board members at our Y. A church meets there on Sundays, and we don't charge them a fee. So there's that flexibility to figure out what that looks like in terms of, you know, what's the trade-off between, you know, community groups that may or may not have the ability to pay, and or how much of that space, you know, again, gets built into the operating budget. You have to factor in allowing for certain percentages of the time to be just for that, for true community space, whether that's a partnership with the Arts Council, whether that's a town hall meeting, whether that's, you know, somebody wants to rent it for a birthday party or a family reunion.
Could I ask what percentage of your members are living, or town citizens that pay town taxes, and what percentage are outside of the town?
We accept anyone, so we do have some members from Woodbine or Damascus, but primarily we have Mount Airy addresses.
Right, but understood, but Mount Airy addresses meaning folks that live.
Do they get a water bill? Is what he's.
2177 Mount Airy.
I know,
We can talk more after.
I understand where his question's coming from, because tax dollars will cover this. So we're looking at,
They may cover this.
Tax-
There may be a full pay.
right, but we're looking at, you know, taxpayer
Absolutely.
benefit, because the 21771 area code is only probably about 1/4 actually people who pay taxes here.
Right, the reason why I asked the question is, I believe it will be a consideration for the council, is if this council, if the town citizens, and when I mean the town citizens, the citizens that live in the town of Mount Airy, and we consider everybody a citizen, right? I mean, it's our community. But the financial burden, or if there is a financial obligation, it falls on the folks living in the town of Mount Airy who pay town taxes. The reason why I asked the question is, you know, there's the idea that, well, if folks in Woodbine, of course everybody's welcome, but then maybe we can work with Frederick, right? Because folks in Woodbine, I'm sorry, that's Carroll. Howard,
Carroll,
right,
or Howard, yeah.
their property taxes, Lisbon, their property taxes, right? So, it's, you know, it's a relevant question to this council because we're responsible to the citizens of the town. So, sorry, Bill. I didn't-
Heather, you had a question?
I didn't have a question, I just had a little piece of information. Since I work for Frederick County Public Schools, I don't know if the council's aware of when we talk about profits and nonprofits and when groups are asking for meeting spaces. A lot of times that people believe, I can't speak to Carroll County, I know their structure is similar. A lot of people will say that you can rent the school, and I don't know if the council's aware of how much it costs for anyone other than a PTA to rent the school. I'm gonna be interested in that information
Oh,
because I
yeah.
can get it right off here. So it's $21 an hour. For nonprofits for Frederick County Public Schools, and it's $19 for the custodian.
But space is very limited, is it not? Because the Carroll County school system actually let Mary Beth and I use the school at no cost, zero. But it was very hard to get in there. We do get Friday nights, but all the nights are booked up by Rex leagues and all our places are filled. Good, but good point.
And that's just a piece, because
That's Frederick.
it's very expensive. Frederick County, my school is a rec council school. I am a rec center at my school with partners with the Y.
And the middle school is also Carroll County. On the Carroll County side is also Rec Center.
And so before they could even walk into my building and even put in an application to be able to use my building, I have to okay it first with the Frederick County Parks and Rec Board to see if they can have it. And then I have to go through the YMCA because we have a rental agreement with them. So the ability for folks like this to get into my building are extremely limited.
Okay,
And
so it's a
costly.
resource, but we know it's limited. Looks like the Y can maybe address this.
I would
type of
assume a
thing.
group too, like Parents at Home, you guys are probably during the day, during the week, when you're having your meetings, correct?
Primarily.
Right, which rules out of school.
Right.
Yes.
I just wanted to take the school part, because you all didn't say school, and I thought
Right.
maybe that might come up since we have some beautiful facilities here in town, Twin Ridge and Forest, and the new Mount Airy Elementary evidently, but I just wanted to put those policy and regs in the back of your mind, because it is extremely difficult to get those spaces.
Thank you. Chris or Bill?
Okay, so I touched on the Howard County facilities that we visited. We went there and for reasons why. Much larger spaces and facilities than we would need, but there was a value in seeing what they had and how it was designed. They were bigger spaces, there were more of those individual try to do more with less. They are butler buildings. They're engineered, prefab buildings to some extent, but they can also be LEED certified, so you can gain that ongoing operating cost as a result of it. We went to one in Jacksonville, north of Baltimore, across the reservoir. Okay? Very interesting. And every one of their facilities is tailor-made to respond to a particular constituency need. That particular facility was programmed and built to respond to a senior component in that community and children's rec activities. And so it basically was half and half of each. We saw a smaller footprint, but again, essential components were there. And probably the construction cost was a little bit better. And it also gave us, as we talked with the engineering and design firms and the construction firm, we got a sense of what those construction costs would be, what the rest of the costs would be. So we got a sense of that as well. Okay? And the Y also has, because they've got so much of a track record in this area, they have development software that you can input assumptions and you can get a sense of what a particular design and how many people you're going to program for and what that might look like. So we gave you that experience as well. So all of that is the underpinning of.
And is that where we're going with that design now?
Yeah, a little bit. We're gonna, so what we did next then was we estimated facility requirements to meet the community needs. So basically, based on the feedback from the needs assessment in terms of what you said you wanted programmatically, we kind of populated that into a tool that I had and kind of came up with kind of a size and a scope of what the facility would look like. And then what also solidified kind of that space was the benchmarking trips. We looked at kind of the granddaddy of the facilities, and then we looked at something that was a little more reasonable. Just to put it in perspective, raise your hand if you've ever been to the downtown Frederick Y. If you've ever been to the downtown Frederick, that's 95,000 square feet, okay? I'm looking at building something in the south part of the county in Urbana, and the maximum size I'm looking at down there is 50,000 square feet, which would be a full facility, which would include aquatics, full gymnasium, licensed childcare. We're not talking about that, and that in and of itself is still only a 50,000 square foot facility. So now put it in perspective as to what you as a community have suggested that you would want and or you said that you need. And then we took that information and we kind of developed into the little probable cost estimate. You're going to see tonight it's the very generic kind of version of that. We didn't go into all the details, but we have the ability to go into the details another day when we do some additional homework and dig a little deeper. Did you have a question?
We had a member of the
ma'am?
Parks Board.
You have a question?
You said downtown Frederick, what's the footprint of the Tally Center in downtown Frederick?
That I do not know. I want to say,
It pops in my head like a small space that they can do a lot amazingly.
yeah, I want to say that's probably about 40,000. If I had to guesstimate, I've been in it once or twice. I don't know if I've seen all of the Tally Center, but I want to say that's probably about 40,000 square feet. The gym, if it's a full-size gym, it's going to take up about 7,800 square feet. If you have a wellness center, most wellness centers are about 6,000 to 8,000 square feet.
I'm just trying to put it in perspective because
Yeah.
I've been to the Y and I've been over there and it's.
Yeah, that's about half of what the downtown Y is, I would guesstimate. But I can find that out for you as well, but yeah, that's a good example. So the next slide is basically, again, just to kind of refresh your memory, based on your programming preferences that came right off of the needs assessment, the number one kind of things that you ranked, we had categories, we kind of listed them in categories: art programs, outdoor education, general classes, indoor stuff, outdoor stuff, youth, adult, those kinds of things. Those were the top kinds of programs. You got everything from music, outdoor education, cooking, you wanted an auditorium, you wanted a game room, amphitheaters, outdoor courts, walking clubs, basketball. Ranking number 2 were field trips, baking, meeting spaces, indoor pool, outdoor courts, climbing walls, volleyball, kickball, just a variety of different kinds of things.
What do the stars mean?
The stars mean, those are all things that we do. That's we being the Y. Those are
Okay.
all programs and services that we typically do on a daily basis. So in terms of programming, That's not foreign to us. So if you said, at the end of the day, that's all we don't want anything else, we just want somebody to come in and manage or provide these programs or coordinate these types of programs, all I'm doing there is demonstrating to you that we have a history and we have a knowledge of doing those programs. And then a booklet that's about this thick with everything else that's not listed on there.
You can
Right.
put 2 stars by art and music, because Terry King has that covered.
Okay, I will. All right, sounds good. So that was so here's the space planning. So roughly, if we went for the basic kind of nuts and bolts of the facility, which I think to meet the general needs of what you said as a community that you needed, we think everything that Mount Airy needs can be accommodated in a facility that's 20,000 square feet or maybe slightly less. But that's just kind of a guesstimate. So you've got a lobby gathering space. You may have a wellness center. You've got a teen or activity room. Yes, sir.
What's the definition of a wellness center?
That would be an area that would actually have some designated fitness equipment. Could be cardiac equipment, treadmills, ellipticals, exercise space. You would leave it set up all the time. The benefit in that would be that's what would sell or generate some membership revenue. The second piece to that, the benefit of that would be if you've identified a partner like a healthcare provider or a hospital, they would have value in having access to that type of equipment. If you wanted to partner with other groups, wellness, walking groups, homeschool, we do homeschool groups and teach PE at the Y right now for homeschool groups. Those would all be components within the facility that they could find beneficial. Does that make sense?
Next election,
Okay. So teen and activity room, that was high on the list. We thought you probably want at least 3 multi-purpose rooms, which could be also converted into exercise studios. What was cool, for instance, in one of the facilities that we went on, they had one wing of the facility was just really long, and it was like one huge space that would probably at the end of the day was about, I don't know, I want to say close to 6,000 square feet, maybe a little bit less, maybe about, 5,000 square feet. But it had the ability to be subdivided into 1 large space or 3 smaller spaces or 2 spaces. So it had partitions. And so at one end of the room, it had a prep kitchen. Actually, one of the facilities had a state-of-the-art commercial-grade kitchen, which, in my opinion, was overkill for that facility because they did cater lunches to the seniors and stuff, but they actually brought it in. They didn't even cook the food in that space. It really was just used as a prep kitchen. So you could get away with a prep kitchen for catering and for programs and for rentals and those kinds of things. That was at one end. And then you could, close off the partition, and then the other room or the other 2 rooms could be an art class going on, it could be an aerobics class or a Pilates class, it could be your group meeting, it could be a variety of things. So again, you had the ability to accommodate a large group of 150 to 200 people at one time, or you could have a room that would accommodate 60% or 75%, or you had 3 rooms that could accommodate smaller groups and have multiple programs going on simultaneously. So you have that flexibility, which is kind of nice to have that type of thing. Locker rooms, you may decide that you need them or don't need them. There may not be a need. That could be something that may be a little overkill. The difference in one of the facilities, they called them locker rooms. To be honest with you, they were glorified bathrooms. They had a couple restroom stalls. They had maybe 1 shower area in the corner, and they had a small bank of lockers that you got to use for day use, but it wasn't like it was this huge space. So they really turned their bathrooms into kind of mini locker rooms, but you could scale that back a little bit if you wanted to. Traditionally, you have men's locker rooms, you have women's locker rooms, and then you may have what we call a family locker room. So if you're a single parent, if I'm a female that has a child that's a son, and he's at an age where I don't feel comfortable bringing him into the women's locker room, I could go into the family locker room to assist him. If I'm a parent who has a child with special needs, I may want to go into a family locker room. If I'm an adult and I have an older senior that I'm assisting or needs some additional care, I may want to go into the family locker room. So again, you have some space there to work with. Again, a prep kitchen, that's not a huge expense, and it doesn't have to be overkill. We saw overkill, but that, if you're gonna do rentals, and you wanna do catering, and you wanna do special events, and you wanna do community galas and those kinds of things, it's almost a necessity. I would equate it to something that's probably similar to every single one of your churches in the downstairs basement, right? Then you have child watch / fun zone. Again, this could be a negotiable item. One of the facilities we saw did not have this, which I think in hindsight, that was something that as an afterthought, they probably realized they probably should have or could have put in. But this is beneficial that if you are gonna do, let's say, group exercise classes, or you are gonna do a meeting where you don't wanna necessarily have the children in attendance, this is a non-licensed childcare, basically babysitting kind of room. So it's available to those that come in to participate in a program or a class, or that are a member of the facility. So I can't leave my child in that facility and go grocery shopping and get my hair done, but I could come in, take an exercise class, go to a meeting, take an art class, do whatever I need to do, and put my child in a room that's age appropriate with age appropriate activities while I'm in the facility, using the facility. Does that make sense? And there's no additional cost. That's included in whatever the fee structure is. You can build that in. Again, the purpose of this is to not nickel and dime community members, but is to come up with some kind of pricing structure that makes it user-friendly. You'll have some administrative offices. Again, this could be as few as 2 or 3 and as many as 4 or 5. It depends on the performer that you put together, and depends on the staffing structure of what we've determined at the end of the day we need to operate the facility and to manage the facility and to program the facility. And we can be on a modest kind of skeleton crew, or you can have, overstaff, and so you just got to be careful with that. But you'd want to have some kind of administrative offices. And then you would, probably a full court gymnasium. I would say that this is probably a non-negotiating point. I think gym space, to your point with the schools, I know what it's like even from Hawaii. We're packed, there's not enough. George does a lot in the community and refereeing, and for other groups in Parks and Recreation and other community groups, and there just never seems to be enough gym space in any community. So again, to have that access, to have that flexibility, you could also, if you design it correctly, you could turn it into an auditorium. You may be able to build a stage in at one end. You may be able to have some kind of seating. Again, it could hold large groups for large functions, and just give you that flexibility. So you're talking about a 20,000 square foot facility approximately. I'd say between 18 to 20,000. In terms of cost, again, this is very crude. Planning and design, engineering, you're probably talking about $750,000 for that. In terms of new construction costs, the rates, based on stuff that I know that's going on right now, and based on conversations that we have with the 2 facilities or the 3 facilities that we toured, you're looking at anywhere from about $150 to $157 on the average, $157 on the average to build. And that may not even still necessarily include FF&E. And FF&E is fixtures and furnishings and equipment. So that's not all the cool stuff that actually goes in the facility either. It's just the construction. That's the bricks and mortar. Now, you want the climbing tower, or you want the chair to sit on when you come into the lobby, and you want the table to eat on when you have your, that's another dollar amount that we have to factor in. And then we estimated about $250,000. So you're looking at about $4 million, and you're only looking at about $4 million, and again, give or take a few dollars. This is very probable costs. This is assuming that you own the property. Right? We haven't even talked about if you have to go out and purchase land, or you have to acquire land. If you already own the land, or you already have a facility that you can renovate, or you have some space, that's great as a bonus. If you don't, then you have to look at all that. Yes, sir.
Question, this is maybe another opinion, but I think if you do something like this kind of money, you're talking a county project, you're not talking a town project. You're talking $4 million for 9,000 or 10,000 people. I think that's way out of line.
Okay, yeah.
Let me finish. You got another building down here that you're talking about redoing. Where's this coming from? I'm living in town. You're talking 9 or 10,000 people, $4 million. That's ridiculous in my book. I'm not against it, but it should be a county project, just like
address, you're assuming that you're paying that $4 million.
I don't
Am
know
I
where
correct?
it's come from, that's why I'm asking it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you if we're putting if we're writing a check for $4 million. We've not put together, one of the beauties of partnering with a private partnership with the Y is we don't have to come up with that $4 million. That's given a cost estimate. From there, we give a breakdown, and there's been several partnerships throughout the country where there's been total paybacks where it cost the town zero.
I talked about that, you still got to plan from somewhere.
Well, Ken, you heard me ask the question, who built the building in the other project? They said the YMCA built the building and paid for it. That was why I asked that question. Because I'm looking at the same, I'm looking at the same dollars and saying if somebody else wants to come in and build the building and run it, and maybe we give them the land to put it on, because we have some land that we could work something out with. You know, that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at myself, the town outlaying this money, which is why I asked that specific question, who built that?
Yeah, I don't, well,
I understand your question completely, don't worry.
well, and more to your point, the town is not writing a check for $4 million, or perhaps if they are writing a multi-million-dollar check, it would be with a contract for either full payment or mostly full payment. I don't know. We haven't worked out those details. But there's no doubt to build, just to renovate this town hall, how much was it, Peter?
I think it was about 1.6 million.
Okay, almost $2 million to renovate town hall. If you want a community center program, if you want to fill these needs, it's going to cost to build it. Who pays for the cost? That's why I'm suggesting we as a town do not do it on our own. And again, that's just one cost. That's just to build it. The ongoing maintenance is even worse. The ongoing management. We want to stay away from that as a town. Again, the beauty of a private-public partnership, and that's what we're here tonight to discuss.
Yeah, at
So
the
thank
end,
you.
Can I ask what land we have to give to the project? in
There's
town?
several potential sites. As you know, there's the Shops of Yesteryear that's on the market, and that's for many, such as perhaps Councilman Bob King, that's very concerned with revitalizing downtown. There's also Watkins for some of those. Certainly, you might have a different view on that. There's cold storage. That's another blighted property behind us. There's a potential Beck property further down Center Street, which may help open up Center Street. So there's several potential sites. We haven't gotten to the sites, and we haven't got the money.
But those aren't properties that we own.
No, the property.
Those are properties that
Right.
would have to be purchased. And I think the question was, because Peter said we have land that we're willing
We do
to
have
give.
two
So,
areas.
We have
so
Windy
my,
Ridge Park
Windy
so
Ridge
my-
Park and Watkins Park.
and Watkins Park.
Okay,
Correct.
So
Those are two parks we own.
Those are two we own.
And we might find more scattered around we haven't thought about, but off the
Well,
top of my
we're
head, those are
thinking
two we
rails to
own.
trails. And we do have other land over in Twin Ridge, but along rails to trails, that's kind of keeping Windy Ridge Park, I think, would knock us off the rails to trails. So I hope that answers your question. And about your money, we're not talking about the town writing a check. We're talking about a partnership, so we don't have to write a check. Or if we do, we get payback. I'll let you-
thanks on that happy note. I can talk to that too in a little bit as well. So what are the benefits of a collaboration? Top community needs match well with the WISE cause areas of focus in the strategic plan. So that would be a benefit if we decided to look at partnering together. There's a deficit in the variety of programs and services offered within the community. And that came out, I think, just in the needs assessment. You have annual operating and overhead costs potentially could be underwritten by programs, membership, and fundraising, which would come from, the ability to create a revenue stream, right? Regardless of who manages the building at the end of the day. You have the opportunity to create some revenue. You have the potential for limited subsidy moving forward if you partner with somebody, so government or other required to support services beyond the capital construction. So if you choose to partner, let's say if we use the Y as an example, and you're in a position or we figure out where the capital dollars come from and how the facility gets built to begin with, at the end of the day, provided we can put together a budget pro forma that makes sense, that could be self-sufficient, you're out of the operating. I mean, you may have some responsibility or a portion of the responsibility to help front the capital costs in a project, but then at the end of the day, if we can put a forma together that allows the operating group to come in to build and provide services that generate revenue to become self-sufficient, there may be opportunity, to Pat's point, where there could be some lease or repayment that would help offset whatever the original capital outlay was.
As
for-
well as bonding, I didn't even get into
Yeah.
underwriting bonds, and we're a sustainable community, there's some potential funding there. But moving forward would also, that cost would be reduced by those mechanisms as well. We haven't gotten into the mechanisms.
The
I
other
don't think
thing-
anybody's writing a check.
Yep, exactly. And then the last one I wrote is just that the opportunity to potentially decrease current city operating costs associated with maintaining skate park operation and park grounds and maintenance. So for instance, let's just say, again, maybe it's not the best example, but if we use Watkins Park as an example, I don't know, Monica was gonna help research, but I don't know what your annual costs are right now to maintain that park. If it's $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, I don't know what you're dropping in to maintain that park at the moment. But whatever that dollar amount is, if, let's say, that ends up being the suitable site where you end up deciding that's where you want to build your community center, depending on who you partner with, that could be built into the operating agreement where that management organization, whether that's the Y or some other outside group that you want to partner with. Again, I'm not married to this project by any means, people. You may want to think about including the park maintenance as part of that responsibility of that agency or organization that manages the facility for you, and whatever those fees are that you currently absorb now and cover would then be the responsibility of that organization that comes in and operates that site or that facility at that site. So let's say it's $5,000 or $10,000, let's say it's $50,000. You could then redistribute that money and move it back into some other line item within your city budget, or you could use that for debt repayment on whatever we borrowed to build the facility. I mean, again, you could be as creative with this process as you want, or you cannot. But that's kind of what some of the benefits of the collaboration are. The next steps, again, this is kind of, what our thought was, is that looking for the council to kind of, one, adopt whether or not they want to proceed with the community center concept, which aligns with your town master plan. I didn't approach the community of Mount Airy. Okay, the community of Mount Airy approached the Y and said, are you interested in talking to us, and do you have any kind of history and have any experience in doing these kinds of things, and if so, can you help guide us? And so that's kind of how we got to the table. So if you as a community or as a council decide that this is still a hot topic and this is still a priority of something that you need to continue to research to, at the end of the day, decide you're going to do it or you're not going to do it, or you're going to put it to bed, and you're going to, move forward with this, or you're not in a position to do it for whatever reason, at some point you probably need to come up with that final determination. But if you're interested and you think that the concept of the community center is still a good idea, then, we would ask permission to continue to have conversation and to help you kind of vet through this process. So we're asking for approval for the task force to continue to research and potentially develop a detailed operating budget and pro forma, which means at some point then we need to get down to the details. We need to maybe look at a very specific location, and we need to finalize the actual physical amenities, and at some point say, this is what we absolutely need or can or cannot do. And then we spend a little more homework and a little more time putting together budget operating pro forma. At the end of the day, I will guarantee you, I'm not going to be in a position to partner on behalf of the Y with any project that doesn't make good business financial sense for the Y. Okay? So it's not going to happen, and it has to make good financial business sense for you as community members as well. At some point, we would secure and finalize an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding or some kind of operating agreement. That's where we get very specific with who's bringing what to the table, how long are we talking about being a partner, what does that look like, how do we ensure that you know what you're talking about as a Y, if let's say you choose the Y to move forward, to have a conversation with or to partner with. How do we know that you know what you're doing? How do we know that you know how to run this type of business? How do we know that in a couple years you're not going to come back and say, I can't make this work, and now you're on the hook for a facility and you don't know how to program it and you can't pay the bills? What does that look like? Those are all great questions. Those are all things that, again, we're going to try to answer by doing due diligence and by doing the homework. And then the last thing moving forward was, again, you gotta increase community engagement. At some point, you gotta continue to host community forums, you gotta identify and secure potential partners. We're not the only partner in town, people. Again, you've got school districts, you've got hospitals, you've got private businesses, you've got, there's grant opportunities, there's lots of options here.
Twice as many as
Um,
everybody else, because we have Carolina.
You can finalize the facility design and concept, and you kind of identify the site. Those are the end of the day, those are still some things that, it's a crapshoot right now. And those are dominoes that haven't fallen yet. Does that make sense? Sir, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Quick question. In the areas around the community wide support
Yes, sir.
endeavors, were any of them about the size of the population in Mount Airy, or were they larger?
Great question. Similar, Hutto is a good example. Hutto, when we started services and programs in the Hutto area, population of the community was probably less than 7,000. It's now probably grown to about 14 or 15,000. We're in, like I said earlier, we're in the process of building a facility there that at the end of the day, for the $5 million that the committee was able to secure through a bond process, they're building about a 35,000 square foot facility that is also a partnership with the developer. The developer had the land. They were building a new strip mall with the Lowe's and some other stores, and the developer saw value in donating the land. So they donated land to the city, and the city then is kind of doing a ground lease very inexpensively to the Y. So they're going to own the property that the facility sits on, and they technically own the property. But at some point, the Y has put together a budget pro forma that over the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they're at a point where it's self-sufficient and self-sustaining, where they're actually able to pay back the city, almost like a build-a-suit concept. Yes, sir.
So in all the communities that maybe you're involved with, again, have you been able to develop any kind of a template for determining the viability and success of the project based on the topography of that area, based on the population, and other metrics that you might have put into the pot?
Yeah, excellent question. And I just got a really cool tool that was sent to me today from YUSA. We're working with, I have resources, as Bill alluded to. One of the beauties of working with, let's say, an organization like the Y is you got 150 plus years of proven practices. We also have a ton of resources that are at my disposal through YUSA, and I have a resource director that's assigned to work with me on special projects. There are some great tools that I can populate this information in. I've had the YUSA run a specific demographics report for Mount Airy. I can take that information, I can populate this into this new budget tool that I got a copy of today that I'm actually getting ready to use. And there's a partner Y. We also have the ability to partner with other Ys across the country. And so we've been partnered with, of all places, don't laugh, but Detroit. So there's a partner Y in Detroit that the guy's going to come in for 2 days and 3 days and work with us. And in a day, we're going to knock out this budget pro forma, and we're doing it for the South County project. I will know if, based on demographics, based on the size and the scope of the facility that I'm testing the waters on, based on the median household income, based on my mixed rate that I propose that I'm going to charge to access the facility and the types of programs and services, I will have such a detailed pro forma, I will be able to tell you at the end of the day if I can afford to do it or not, and I will tell you how many years, if it's going to take years, to get to a point where it's self-sustaining. My history with this...
I just want to,
Yeah.
but in interest of time, plus I think I've heard a lot. I'm really interested in dialogue between the council and the community. I'll start out with a couple ideas. One of the key takeaways here is approval for task force to continue research.
Correct.
Developing. One of my initial thoughts is to listening to stuff is we shouldn't.
I'm going to put this list up.
Yeah. Chris, if you go back to the
Can you
space
go back to this page?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
So this is my opinion. One of my initial thoughts is anything that we do should not compete with any local businesses. So, for argument's sake,
Very good.
Mr. King agrees. For example, and I'm not arguing the merits at all about what's up here. I'm just saying, for example, the wellness center
It's dying.
competes with
gym.
two local businesses.
Right.
Okay.
Health Unlimited has a full set of
They're this.
facilities. Snap Fitness has a full set of facilities. I don't think that the town, should use its tax dollars, resources to compete with local businesses. I mean, I'm absolutely dead set against that. I think Councilman King is, Councilman Strong is, Peter,
Yeah, oh yeah.
Councilman Hilt is, Dave.
What's that?
Sorry.
Well, what's the question?
Oh, we shouldn't do a.
Like services,
Like
competing
services.
Well,
services.
my question.
Well, wait.
Okay.
Hold on.
Well, no, well,
So at least just ask yes or no. So there's at least 4 of us here that strongly express the fact that we don't want to. We shouldn't sponsor resources, as the mayor said, that compete with local businesses. So, I mean, so if the takeaway is let's continue researching where we're going, perhaps we should start to focus in on. You have to make a business case, of course. You focus in on the factors here that we like or we don't like, and try to I mean, certainly the teen center is greatly wanted. Meeting rooms are greatly
well,
wanted. Well, sorry, Dave.
Yeah,
wants to
go ahead,
go.
David.
And then,
Well,
and-
we're
well,
gonna
he-
get to you guys,
We
because remember,
will.
you are the
But
boss.
let Dave.
well, the question, and this sort of piggybacks off of what Chris is saying. You have to set up a business case, and what I heard earlier is right or wrong, and I haven't made my mind up. The wellness center is a way to bring in revenue.
Correct.
If we start piecemealing and we start pulling out the revenue aspects, it starts to weigh the business case against you saying, I can't make money here, and now the YMCA no longer becomes an option. So, whereas I understand what you're saying, Chris, because I'm not for throwing things automatically in, but if we automatically start taking things off the table and we handcuff the YMCA is going to turn around and say,
And just for the
we
record,
can't make money.
I totally agree with Councilman.
Well, and then
What?
Totally agree.
Can I get that on tape?
It's on tape. It's on tape.
But
I totally
my
agree.
point is, Chris, my point is follows what Councilman Blaze is saying, is if we remove factors here,
Correct.
that
changes my performance.
that changes what your model looks like. And the conclusion might be at the end of the day, your model becomes unsustainable. We don't know that, but
Right.
I think one of your takeaways you're looking for is, okay, what does the task force continue to do? So I think you've heard I know you've heard from 4 councilmen here that said, if it competes with a local business, wellness center is certainly one of them. Please don't do that, because at least the 4 of us here will not support town resources. Now, that being said, I know that
You got some hands up. Let's get her.
I have 2 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
One of them with the wellness center. I used to be a member of Health Unlimited, and I stopped going there because it cost too much money.
I'm sorry, but please remember one thing. Somebody has to pay for it, and we're talking
Well, I
about
understand
taxpayer.
that, but if I pay a membership to join the Y, and it doesn't cost me as much money, then,
But the problem we have
Well,
is.
let her finish. She's been patient.
Okay,
You
yeah,
finish your
sorry.
comment?
well, no, I mean,